say with complete confidence that Al-Qaeda was involved in it, and that certainly the State Department knew that Al-Qaeda had a major presence in Benghazi prior to the attack.
We have no indications that they directed or planned this attack. And I just reiterate a point that, every bad guy with a gun isn't Al-Qaeda. That may be a useful shorthand for politicians to use, but it's not borne out by the facts on the ground.
Saxby Chambliss, top Republican on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and State Department spokesperson Marie Harf sharply disagreeing over the role Al-Qaeda played in the 2012 attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi. And we're back now with the panel. Well, the Senate Intelligence Committee finally came out with its report on the Benghazi terror attack this week, and here was its conclusion. The committee found the attacks were preventable based on extensive intelligence reporting on the terrorist activity in Libya, to include prior threats and attacks against Western targets, and given the known security shortfalls at the U.S. mission. Britt, this is a bipartisan report. Are you surprised how tough it is?
Yes, I was surprised. I didn't think it would. I think what we would probably have was a rather mild set of conclusions from the committee as a whole, because the Democrats have the majority, and then a stronger set of views from the minority. Well, we did have a stronger set of views from the majority, but the majority's view of this was pretty tough, and as you heard Saxby Chambliss note, it did say that Al-Qaeda was involved. What's fun to watch here is the State Department's incredible shrinking definition of Al-Qaeda, which gets down to what they call core Al-Qaeda, which is getting to be so small that it's very hard to detect anywhere. I mean, Al-Qaeda has been an
You have to have a T-shirt that says, "I'm with those guys."
Well, no, I'm with Osama bin Laden man all the way, and I knew him, and he personally trained me. But that's kind of where we are in this story, and you add to that what came out of the House side this week, the testimony of General Ham, who happened to be in town at the time when this attack happened on September 11th, and he and the other senior people at the Pentagon, including the Secretary, were of the view that this was a terrorist attack from the get-go, and they went and Panetta went to the White House and told the president that. So the president, who waffled about what this was for weeks on end, had been told by his senior military leaders right on the day it happened that it was a terrorist attack. Yeah, those two things have moved the ball forward.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because, and we'll get to Ham in a moment, but the report, Bob, the report from Senate Intelligence makes it clear, one, Al-Qaeda affiliates were involved, and two, it says that on September 18th, just 1 week after the attack, the CIA and FBI reviewed the videos of the attack, and it was clear that it was terror. It was clear that this was not some protest. Somebody said a really hostile movie review of that anti-Islam video. That certainly contradicts what the president and his team were saying in the weeks after the attack.
No, it's fascinating when you page through the document. You really see an unsparing critique of Foggy Bottom, of administrative leadership within the president's administration. But at the same time, the legs of this story, I think, are really questionable. Because this is a bipartisan report, will there be questions about states' leadership in the coming days? Sure. But will Hillary Clinton, who's only mentioned once in the document, continue to be the focus of Republican scrutiny? Maybe not.
Let's get to General, and we're going to get to Clinton in a second, but let's get right to General Carter Ham. And to explain again who he is, he was the head of AFRICOM, or the U.S. command in Africa at this time, which had military control over U.S. forces in that region. And he testified back this summer before Congress, and that testimony was released this week. He testified that within minutes of the attack, quote, "To me, it started to become clear pretty quickly that this was certainly a terrorist attack and not just something sporadic." Again, Kim, that is directly contradicting the narrative that came out of the White House in the days right after the attack, the narrative that I heard, and she was sitting right where you are here, from Susan Rice, then UN ambassador, the Sunday after, September 16th. I mean, you got the general in charge of AFRICOM saying it was terror.
Right, and that's why this report does not end anything. It actually opens up a whole new vista on this question and guarantees the story will keep going. Because what we found out in this report, I mean, it was a searing condemnation of sort of state and how they handled, this was a security and intelligence failure, which has resulted in the deaths of 4 Americans. But the fact that...
I mean, just to make the point, they talk about repeated intelligence warnings about the growing terrorism, extremism, this presence in eastern Libya and particularly of al-Qaeda?
These intelligence aides were flooding the zone with reports about deteriorating security. They talked about how tripwires, which were meant to actually bolster security, were ignored. It didn't happen. They talked about the fact that the CIA was paying attention to these things. They bolstered their own security at the annex down the road. The State Department completely dropped the ball here. But I think as a result, that news, I mean, that information, that settlement also combined with the fact that General Ham's comments about them knowing immediately, it does put this all again in a different light and says, okay, did the White House understand just how bad this was? And did that in fact inspire them to come out with a story in an election year that simply was not the case of what had actually happened?
Which brings us to the curious case of Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who is not in the main report issued by this bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee, is not mentioned one time. But the Republican members of the committee had their own appendix in which they said that she should be held accountable for Benghazi. Here's what they said specifically. She was responsible for ensuring the safety of all Americans serving in our diplomatic facilities. Her failure to do so clearly made a difference in the lives of the 4 murdered Americans and their families. Juan, is that fair?
I don't think it's fair at all. I mean, I think that what you have here is a situation where, as the report said, this was preventable. They could have prevented this because they should have been able to shore up security at the consulate. But the problem is that the intelligence wasn't very good. That's what the real finding of this Senate thing was.
I don't agree with that. They said the intelligence was good, and in fact that the CIA reacted to it, but State didn't.
Well, they had some intelligence. By the way, Carter Ham also said that there was no evidence of an imminent attack there. No, but I think that they said the intelligence, especially the intelligence assessment that was given to the president, was given to Secretary Rice, was consistent with what Secretary Rice said here. And I think that, I think there's a big effort, and I think that's what we see in the appendix to the report, by Republicans to try to pull Hillary Clinton in, because guess what? Hillary Clinton is the leading candidate among the Democrats for president in 2016, and they want to damage her politically with this somehow. But I don't see that this report advances the ball at all.
But you're talking about two different kinds of intelligence. The intelligence warnings that were out there that inspired the CIA to bolster their own security.
Right, and remember, Ambassador Stevens says twice, no, I don't want any additional security.
That's the question of Hillary Clinton's culpability in the fact that State Department ignored these tripwires and these intelligence assessments. So that's a different question from what intelligence the White House got about what happened on the day.
What I don't understand, one, is how her department, which she was head of, can be responsible for multiple failures in this thing, and she's blameless.
Well, she's not in charge of security. You think she's on the line for security?
Juan, is she ultimately in charge? Is she ultimately responsible for what happens under her leadership in the department?
Certainly, but you have people who are in charge of security, and you have an ambassador on the ground who twice says,
I don't want...
No, I didn't say she's blameless, but the idea that she has some personal culpability and that was a political liability.
One of the bigger questions, though, I mean, and this is just now a meme about this administration, no one is ever held accountable for anything. I mean, if not Hillary Clinton, then who in the State Department is meant to be held accountable? And this White House, there's no one accountable for IRS, there's no one accountable for this, there's no one accountable for health care. It's endless.
That's a political argument.